Pittman, one of the development teams of WP Optimiser, over the weekend, but unfortunately that transatlantic Skype call, when we recorded it, the resulting video was all but unusable. So we're going to try to still salvage something of that, but wanted to go into part of what we learned with Chris during our discussion. And we are looking today at WP Optimiser. This is, as it sounds, an optimization plugin for WordPress. It also has a companion cache, which is very powerful. We'll take a look at that too. But we just wanted to get started with this and let folks know about WP Optimiser. We operate about 70 different WordPress sites in production right now, including several that are very high volume legacy news sites, and we struggle with optimization and site load speed and a whole bunch of other issues. And we have tried every cache on the market, I think. We've tried most of the database tools, the optimization tools. So when Chris introduced us to WP Optimiser, we were exceptionally happy to see somebody that actually had sort of that broad take of operating websites in the real world versus a lot of these products seem to be created by developers that don't necessarily have a great grasp on what it takes to operate a WordPress site for years and years and years. So with that said, we're going to get started with a tour of WP Optimiser. For all of its superficial simplicity, WordPress itself is a complex beast and getting more complicated with each update and each new wave of plugins. At its core, WordPress is just a set of PHP scripts and a single database. What could go wrong? Huh. Lots of things. Database issues can dramatically slow WP sites, WordPress sites. And when we're talking about database issues, essentially there's a set of core database tables that is the plain vanilla WordPress installation. And once you start adding plugins and other functionalities to WordPress, you end up with more and more tables within the database. And at the, depending on your server and your hosting, you may overwhelm the limits of the MySQL database pretty easily by just loading up sites with plugins and functionality. So, in many plugins, even when you delete them, they still leave the residual tables in your WordPress database. So, just to give you an idea of some of the complications that you can arise with WordPress. Every task you do creates cruft in the database, from iterations, that's drafts of your posts and revisions, to metadata messes and comment confusion. Rapidly becomes overwhelming if sites are in production for daily use. Complicating matters are images, and WordPress makes multiple copies of every uploaded image in multiple sizes. So themes require images to be in different sizes for display, thumbnails, etc. And it will go ahead and take a single uploaded image, and it may make multiple images from that. And the simple PHP scripts get very complicated when you have multiple themes and multiple plugins, and many of the themes and plugins aren't really designed to work together. WP Optimiser is a new tool that takes on speed issues in WordPress and attacks potential database problems with the minimum of complexity. It's got a companion piece of software, Viper Cache, which adds some pretty impressive speed improvements to sites with a minimum of hassle. If you've looked at some of the other caching options out there. Many of them have a ton of technical settings and details that are very, very difficult to master and very, very difficult for you to figure out which combination of settings makes the most sense for you. Every few months, one of our 70 plus WordPress sites gets sick, and when they get sick, they take down other sites in the same server. Or we have a sudden uptick in sites visits, and if you've got an inefficient WP installation, it will grab either more bandwidth or processing power away from its sister sites. It generally takes us about an entire day, sometimes two, one bad example, about a week, to fix the problem, get everything back on track. And that often includes hours spent purging unoptimized images. And we take a lot of images with our camera phones, and let's have great resolution, great image quality, but they end up with image sizes that are just overwhelming for WordPress. So if you're not optimizing your images before you upload, you really need a tool that will take care of that for you within your sites. Thankfully, WP Image Optimizer optimizes images kind of on the fly. If we look at this, this is a demo site, obviously. It will optimize both your existing images through a bulk image optimization scheme. You can set this number here. This keeps you in line with the free requirements. They're using an external third-party system called TinyPNG to optimize your images. But you can, if you've got an existing legacy site, you can take that legacy site and bulk optimize all the images. And if you've got a newer installation, obviously it will optimize the images as you bring them up. And this is really one of those things that it's not just a matter of site load speed, it's keeping the size of the overall WordPress installation down to size. There's just no other way to sort of reduce the load on the processor and on the amount of storage you're using up that's quite as effective as optimizing images. When we interviewed Chris Hittman, one of the key things he explained to us is this is a plugin that can batch optimize legacy images, processing up to 500 daily. And the user just sets this up once, and it proceeds in the background until the entire media library has been processed. Once active, this feature will automatically optimize the images that are uploaded to the media library or set as the featured image on a post. With each uploaded image, WordPress will automatically create multiple resized images that are required by your theme, and all of those will be optimized. Hittman added, they use the popular image optimization service TinyPNG, which applies the best possible optimization. Here, WP Optimizer also uses the lazy load features. This is one of those things, and there's a number of standalone solutions in this area out there, but this is one of the things that can really speed up load time. It is one of those things that when an entire WordPress page loads at a time, the viewer can only, their page visitor can only see part of the page at a time. So there's no reason to preload all the images that may be sort of below the fold, further down the page post than is needed at the time. The other thing is, if you can get the page to load the key text first and then start bringing in the slower loading images, you'll get that boost from Google in terms of page load time. It's really sort of one of those things that's common sense, and WP Optimizer achieves that very nicely. Here's the piece of WP Optimizer that I find so interesting. This is the database optimization portion of it. And this is one of those things where if you use some of the other tools that are out there, you can be overwhelmed with the data. But this gives you a quick snapshot of where you're at in terms of what is in your WordPress database. It gives you the ability to look at each one of these areas: optimization, revisions, autosaves, and trash posts. If you've got a production site that's got, say, 3,000 or 4,000 posts on it, you will find that there are probably 3 or 4 times that many autosaves or revisions on there. Whole issue with comments and this orphaned metadata. This is metadata that sits around on the database that exists from posts or pages that have been deleted, and these really build up with time as well. Each page or each post in WordPress has its own metadata associated with it. Most of that's generated on the fly. Many of us use plugins that create additional metadata for SEO optimization. So like the Yoasts of the world and the WP Supremacies or Project Supremacies all create additional metadata. You delete a post and you clean up your WordPress site, it leaves all that stuff behind as sort of ghosts. So these are the sort of issues that you want to be able to take care of with the plugin, and WP Optimiser does that quite nicely. Which brings us to what I think is the killer feature of WP Optimiser, the site health check. Now, if you use Jetpack, you know that it will send you an email when your site goes down, which is actually sort of warning you after something's already died. WP Optimiser takes a different approach. It actually looks at the factors that determine your site health. It will tell you about the server uptime, it'll check the PHP version, gives you a rundown on real-time memory usage, PHP memory usage. So that's sort of 2 things. You've got your storage piece, all the content basically within WordPress, that's your memory usage. And then you've got the PHP memory usage, and that's sort of the active, what is running in the background. Tells you your CPU load and your disk usage, maximum file upload size, and your max PHP execution time, and it checks your connectivity. And it pings from multiple spots around the world to tell you how your site is performing for visitors, no matter where they come from. And this is the killer piece of this. It will email you if you're having problems. It will provide a daily checkup of your site via email so you can get on top of things before Jetpack tells you that your site has crashed. This is something that I wish I'd been able to do years ago. It would have saved many man hours of time troubleshooting just to have this information or have it provided to you via email every day if you've got an issue. It's much better to have a heads up than that wave goodbye as your site is going down. All right, last big area on our tour of WP Optimiser is the site speed profiler. Now, most folks that have been in the WordPress game for a while are familiar with what's called P3, the plugin profiler that I believe it was a GoDaddy produced plugin, and we used to use it quite frequently, but what we found is the plugin itself hasn't been updated in 3 years, and so it's no longer working with some of the newer installs of WordPress, and we've moved away from it because it was deprecated and we weren't sure of what we were getting. But what WP Optimiser has done, and this is all in one package, that's the thing, we're not talking about throwing a half dozen plugins at a WordPress site to get this functionality. It all comes in one package. The image optimization, the lazy loading, the optimization of the database, and now this kind of detailed checking on site speed, what matters with site speed, is all here in one single platform, one single plugin. And this is providing you, with the load in time, the total load time, the amount of time that is being required to load the plugins, to load your theme, and your core WordPress load in time. So what this means is that you can effectively do sort of an A/B split testing with plugins and themes to see which is causing, which gives you a lighter site, a site that loads more quickly. So you can swap out themes, you can swap out plugins with equivalent functionality and get real-time feedback on how it's working. And this is the important part for troubleshooting. The impact of plugins on load time is tremendously variable. And you can see here, what's happening in terms of being able to look at the overall impact of a given plugin. And you can see here, it looks like WordFence security is the real hog. The other thing that WP Optimiser does that no other plugin that I know of does is combine this with benchmarking. So they take a benchmark site speed and they compare your site to the benchmark site and let you know, do you have an issue? And this can be, you can look at this right here and see that the WordPress core load time is low, is slower than the benchmark essentially. And so to explain this in the simplest terms, that means that the host here, or the server here, is actually slowing down the function of this site. It's making the pages of the site load more slowly than the benchmark, because all WordPress sites have the same WordPress core. So that is a key piece of data here, and it allows you to test and see over time. Is something happening with the plugin? Is the plugin not being updated? Is it causing problems over time? Because it's saving these scans and it'll allow you to sort of track, update something and see if your performance takes a nosedive or improves. This is a really wonderful improvement in sort of the whole optimization scheme. This is one of those things. If you've got a site set up and you've got some of these IM tools like a auto tweeter or something that runs a bunch of cron jobs or something along those lines, you may find that running those plugins with your production site is basically fatal to the overall performance of the site. We always tell people, you want to understand this a little bit better, you want to make your site work better. When you get these tools, don't put the tools on a production WordPress site. Go ahead, create a subdomain, put another WordPress installation on the subdomain, put all your tools on there. It sort of insulates you and creates some insurance. And this right here, the data that this gives you right here is sort of key to making a smart understanding about what you load onto your WordPress site. Hitman also gave us the scoop on the next generation caching that is established with, it's really a companion product to WP Optimiser. It is a cache that is created to work the way that most people use WordPress. So you can see here most caches have a jillion settings. If you're familiar with, say, W3 cache, it is awful in terms of trying to configure it. This has basically taken down the caching, and crucially here, it's minimizing JavaScript. It's also loading the JavaScript parts of a file later in the page load sequence. These are all keys. We're using 2 or 3 different plugins just to accomplish this right now with our existing sites. So you can see how powerful essentially what they've done with Viper Cache is. This is a next generation best of breed caching solution. Before you enable Viper Cache, you may want to do your own speed checks with Pingdom or PageSpeed and see what you've got, and then try Viper Cache and see if you get that big boost in power. The smart cache preloading features will preload a cache with your home page and your next 5 most popular pages. It's a unique bandwidth saving feature, and as on large sites, cache preloading will tie up your processor, slow down your site, and eat bandwidth. So what you want to do is use a smart cache like Viper Cache. This is one of those features. It's got cache clearing and a whole lot of information about your cache that you don't get from other cache plugins. And this is not one of those things that's particularly glamorous, but we know from experience that caches oftentimes cause huge problems. It's difficult we use Cloudflare on many of our sites, and we have big issues with some of the existing caches in Cloudflare. Viper is something that's sort of been designed for the ground up for 2018 and beyond, and caching's not particularly sexy, and there's not like a ton of features here, but it really does make a big difference. One of the things that Chris and I talked about on our call was the importance of improving speed performance, because what Google is looking to do in the future. Google has told the public that starting in July, the page load times are going to become much more important as a ranking factor, particularly on mobile devices. They're concerned with user experience, so they're going to rank faster loading sites better than slow dinosaur sites, kind of like most of mine are, I think. So if you're looking for a way to stay competitive, to keep up with what's happening in the SEO side of things, you really need to take the time to address page load times. And we've got some demo videos that will show in real time what's happening, and I suggest that you head over to our site or our Facebook page and take a look at those and see some real-time performance videos comparing what happens when you apply WP Optimizer to existing sites, to see the boost in performance, and also to take a look at Viper Cache up against WordPress Rocket, which I think is the leading cache solution on the market. Viper Cache just blows it out of the water. So with that, I won't take any more of your time today. Thanks for hanging out with us. Apologies that we weren't able to capture our conversation with Chris, because he had a lot more insights into this. But as somebody who has been a WordPress power user for years, with a ton of sites and some very demanding sites, and a lot of experience with sites breaking, going down, or being incredibly sluggish, we're extremely impressed with the combination of WP Optimizer and Viper Cache, and we think you will be as well. Thanks.